Attendez la crème.
Welcome back, nerds. Fino here. One of the metaphorical holy grails of Fate Grand Order is the single-target arts Berserker, combining the refund potential of blue cards with the generalist power of everyone's favorite Unga Bunga class. But up until this point, things have been on the underwhelming side, with Vlad being the only real option. Sorry, Salamis Simps. And though he's been given a drip feed of buffs, Vlad hasn't exactly been ideal either. The guy really makes you work for that refund. But now we have Galatea, who's packing a strong defensive suite, and all that other good stuff you'd want from an art Zerk. What could possibly go wrong? Let's start our look under the hood with Pygmalion's Love. It gives arts and buster buffs with one application of buff removal resistance. As a cherry on top, it also comes with a fixed 20% battery. The amount you get is independent of the level. Buff removal resistance pairs nicely with Castoria's NP. Some of the most annoying fights in the game feature enemies with buff purges, and while it's only for herself, having some ability to parry that is quite useful. Next up we have Sculpted Maiden. It's a stackable guts with a 2-hit defense buff. 2-hits might seem pretty lackluster, but take a look at that magnitude. 100%. For anyone that remembers my old Ibaraki Doji video, you'll know that at a net 100% defense, you're effectively invulnerable. Even Invuln Pierce won't go through it. This gives Galatea the potential to face tank noble phantasms, and even if she gets overwhelmed, you have that guts as a backstop. Now there is a catch. Unless you're running into a breakbar mechanic, enemies generally don't start a fight with their noble phantasms up. This means you have to choose between stuffing a future NP and avoiding chip damage from being a berserker. Gotta strike that balance between risk and reward. That said, in more conventional battles, you can just pop this immediately for protection and rely on Castoria to parry NPs. Rounding out Galatea's regular skills is Aphrodite's Boon. On release, this is a 2k heal per turn and cleanse for your entire team. Down the road, it gets an upgrade that gives Galatea 10% charge when she hits with her buster cards. The heal plays nicely with Castoria since that's one of the things she lacks. Unfortunately, the end of turn cleanse is a bit less useful than it seems on paper. If an enemy sheds debuffs all over you, you still have to take your turn through all those effects. Then you get cleansed. In most situations, a start of turn cleanse is what you really want. That said, the end of turn effect has one niche it excels in: fights where you get debuffs just for hitting the enemy. This will prevent them from capitalizing on your weakened state. Now, these skills are really neat and all, but the main draw of a single target arts Berserker is, in fact, their noble phantasm. Pygmalion Chisel Out reduces your target's charge, and its overcharge effect is a preemptive 3-turn NP damage buff, so if you can loop successfully, you'll snowball on successive turns. Helping her along is a very generous hit count of 9. That alone won't get you to a full charge, but it greatly reduces your face card RNG. Her 20% battery and the flat charge from her 3rd skill upgrade help smooth things out on this front. To guarantee a successful string of NPs, you should incorporate some combination of additional help on top of the generic Castoria package. For Mystic Codes, Fragment of 2004 is the go-to for non-swap builds. It provides NP gain, NP damage, and Buster Star absorption buffs. That last part comes into play once Galatea gets her upgraded 3rd skill. If you're willing to run the combat uniform though, you have some additional team building options. If you want to take the typical NP gain route, you can use Tamamo, Nero Bride, Paracelsus, or Asclepius. Personally though, I like the idea of Rhaenys more. She gives broad charge, attack and defense buffs, an Invuln to fill gaps in Galatea's super defense, and a Noble Phantasm can nullify the Berserker class's defensive disadvantage. Oh yeah, it cleanses and gives NP gain anyway, so there you go. Someone give that girl a K-scope. For a bit of extra tweaking, you can run the Magus of Flowers command code for more flat charge. And while we're on the subject of codes, you can do some future-proofing by putting an NP damage option like Da Vinci on her quick card. Go quick and then NP to reap the benefits. Once we get Mighty Chains, you can close it out with a Buster card to get the full bonus, while also gaining crit chance and Galatea's own on-hit effect. There's also the Load Magical Energy append skill, which lets Galatea start the fight with up to 20% more charge. Unfortunately, you lose a bit of value because Galatea's own battery is only 20%, meaning you'd have to keep both of Castoria's NP gain skills in reserve to avoid wasting charge. Ideally, you'd be using one or both to maximize your refund, but you can't exactly leave flat charge on the table either. Now, there is one final thing about Galatea's NP. It might make sense to hold it back if you want to make sure your Castoria absorbs an incoming NP. If you reduce charge recklessly, you can end up in a far worse position, where you have to pop Round of Avalon prematurely to keep one of your frontliners alive through regular attacks. At this point you might be thinking, hey Clickbait McGee, Galatea seems pretty good, what gives? Well, here's the thing. Galatea is indeed the best single target arts Berserker. For about 3 weeks. Because 1 week after Akihabara Explosion ends, we get a round of strengthening quests, and among these gems is something that's gonna rock this game to its foundation. Moriarty gets a star dump, so he can finally activate his battery without any help. Oh, and I guess Vlad gets a buff too. This gives his Noble Phantasm extra damage and adds a multi-turn arch resistance debuff. With this upgrade, Vlad will do more damage than Galatea, even though she has a preemptive NP damage buff, and his arch debuff only applies after the hit. And this difference is the most pronounced at lower NP levels, with Vlad having more than 5k damage over Galatea at NP 1. And things just get worse and worse for our fancy pants friend. Not only does Classically Bait do more damage, but it has a higher hit count, and it dumps out stars. It's not 50 stars, so you still have to worry about the wrong servants absorbing them, but the fact that Vlad has any kind of crit potential at all gives him an edge over Galatea, who has absolutely nothing in terms of star generation or absorption, despite insisting that you use her buster cards. I'd argue her battery is worse too. Vlad's is tied to his charge drain, but he gets 30% versus Galatea's 20%, meaning he has more flexibility as to which Castoria skills you commit on turn 1. The guy has a double guts to boot. Yeah, he can't chain drain, his defense buff is weaker, and he doesn't have any form of healing or cleanse effect, but he got the better deal overall. I don't know what inspired them to power creep a current servant within a week of her introductory event, but this is insane. She's a general pool servant too, which begs the question as to why they released a general pool servant that power creeps another general pool servant, only to rebuff Vlad to power creep Galatea. Like, why? I can't even see any profit in it. Vlad's one of the game's earliest servants. He has a servant ID in the 50s, he's like right next to Kentucky on the release list, so logically there'd be a substantially higher number of Vlads out in the wild than Galatea's, meaning that unless you're either new or supremely unlucky, Galatea doesn't serve any truly special function. If you like her as a waifu, so be it. If you want to turn her pants into a sock, that's between you and Chaldea's dry cleaning, but in gameplay the value proposition leaves something to be desired. You know what the worst part is? This whole dick-waving contest between Vlad and Galatea? It's pointless, they both lose. June of next year, a 4-star servant gets released. Single target arts berserker, 50% battery, targeted taunt, preemptive defense buff removal. And here's the bonkers thing. She does less damage than the other two by default, which you'd expect from a lower rarity pick, but if you run her into either a chaotic or dragon enemy, she blows both Vlad and Galatea out of the water. And you could of course grail her to get her neutral damage up. There is a catch though. Creamhild is a story-locked servant, and her first raid up has her on a split banner with Roland, a notably, less good pull. She gets a proper solo banner later that year, but getting copies in the first few months can be a bit of a problem. Otherwise, she's the gold standard for this particular role. So in other words, Galatea has the unfortunate distinction of being a 5-star servant that gets blatantly power crept twice, once within a week of her event ending and again by a 4-star servant. That's fucking rough. If despite everything you're hellbent on getting her, you can still take advantage of Galatea's strong defensive effects and reasonable beat stick power. Offensive builds can utilize Black Rail for damage, or Formal Craft or another generic art CE for consistency, something like Ocean Flyer, which we're getting for free this summer. Then there's Welcome to Oniland, which is a hybrid arts buster CE with starting charge. If you happen to have it, it'll play nicely in situations where you have to face card more often. Side note, Galatea has Mad Enhancement EX for a nice passive buster buff, but she tragically has nothing in her passives to help her arts playstyle. Galatea's Bond CE is a one-time guts that revives her with 20%, and when triggered, gives your frontline 20% charge. It's useless on attacking builds since you'd have to sacrifice on offensive CE, but if you have some sort of cleanse engine in mind, you can potentially use this. Speaking of which, Galatea's recurring heal and powerful defense buff are counterbalanced with medium-length cooldowns, 6 to 7 turns at max level. Tamamo no Mae lets her cheat these down while doubling down on healing and charge reduction. At this point in team building, Castoria-less players can even opt for Jeanne to form an old-school version of the Immortal team, layering more ways of stalling enemies out while adding an all-important out for enemy NPs. A more unconventional method of using Galatea is to exploit her full defense with a targeted taunt, letting you absorb single target NPs and protect your glass cannons. Chen Gong is one, and he can also give her a steady supply of backline supports. There's also his buster buff, though good luck getting stars on the Galatea with that sort of team. Just remember that if you have any intention of keeping her alive, you'll want to put her in slot 3. That'll keep her out of Gong's line of fire for a while. Ironically, you can also pair Galatea with Creamhild if you're in particular need of a recurring end-of-turn cleanse for the latter. But overall, poor Galatea. She looks like a good deal at first, but once you account for the competition, her banner is revealed to be some pretty insidious bait. My advice is to keep your pants on for the fights to come. Unless you're a whale, you're not going to have the quartz to spend for someone who is, even in the most optimistic lens, a glorified side grade to Vlad. Thanks for watching. I'll be streaming Akihabara Explosion and rolling on this insidious bait banner this weekend, Friday through Sunday. But there's a twist this time. Friday's stream will be over on Fino and Friends. I want to give that channel a little boost, so if you're down to help, stop on by. But that said, like if you found this video helpful, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.